Hey there, friend. Chances are, if you're listening to the Inventory Genius podcast, it's because, well, you really want to become an inventory genius. If that's you, then let's stop just listening. Let's stop just collecting information. Let's start doing. I want to invite you to grab your copy of the Inventory Genius book. I wrote this book with you in mind. It delivers bite-sized actionable steps that will help you use your inventory to create more profit and keep more cash in your business. This is a really easy to read book. In fact, I designed it specifically for the busy inventory-based business owner. It only takes about 2 hours to make your way through, and you're going to leave with practical bite-sized steps so you can start implementing the principles of the Inventory Genius method immediately. Head on over to Ciara, Stockeland.com, where you can grab your ebook, your Audible version, or the printed copy. Enjoy! Hey friend, welcome to the Inventory Genius podcast, where we work together here to make you an inventory genius. We talk about profit, we talk about cash flow, and we definitely talk about your paycheck. Because at the end of the day, it's all related to your inventory. Let's go. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Inventory Genius podcast. I am your host, Ciara, and we are continuing our series on resiliency here. We're not talking about inventory. We're not talking about cash flow for the next couple of weeks. We are talking about another really important component to business life. But all of us have personal lives as well, and all of us have goals that we want to achieve and things that we want to accomplish. I always say there's always stuff going on behind the doors of every house, right? We look at Instagram and we think everyone has it all together, but we all have stuff. We all have hard things. And resiliency is part of building up just those mental muscles to push through and to really build the life that we want. And so I pulled together some beautiful and amazing women in my life that I wanted to learn more from on the podcast. And one of those is Joy, my friend that I have met through triathlon. So Joy is joining us today to talk about resiliency. Welcome, Joy, to the show.
Ciara, thank you so much for having me. And I just want to say, I'm so glad that your community has you as a resource and that you have this podcast. Because fun fact, I think I told you before, I at one point had a little boutique store.
Yes.
And I could not figure out, it was like money in, money out with buying of the new inventory. And I could never figure out how to make it work. And so it only lasted about a year and then I sold it and I was just happy to get out from under it. So I wish I would have known you back then. But yeah, kudos to everybody out there in your world and your business because it's challenging and it does take a lot of resilience.
It absolutely does. Yes. And you have your own business. I met you through triathlon, but give us a little background. Tell us who you are, what you do, why we should listen to you. Tell us about your life.
Sure, absolutely. So what I'm mostly known for on LinkedIn, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I've built quite a following there of over 200 and about 214,000 people on LinkedIn. And it all came from encouraging my community to pursue a growth mindset. And the way I started doing that was through physical challenge. We've been in the sport about the same amount of time. It was about 4.5 years ago now that I just decided to run my first marathon. But it all came from the fact of, just life adding up. I was raising 5 kids, running a business where we build medical practices, specialty medical practices by building the referrals and, put together teams for that. And, I just got to a place where I was comfortable. And as I got more involved on LinkedIn, I realized everybody was talking about this state of being uncomfortable in order to grow. And I was like, I want that. Like, what can I do? Prior to that, I had gone through a lot of personal struggle, lost everything, started over this, it's a long personal story. But I knew looking back that the reason I had the success I had was because I had faced that struggle. And it all started to make sense that struggle always produces growth. So we never want to be in a state of being comfortable. It's the absolute worst place to be. And so, yeah, it was about 4.5 years ago, I decided, what can I do? And to me, I thought physical challenge, like I've always been healthy. I've always worked out, but I had never pushed myself.
Yeah.
And I thought, I've never run a marathon. And so that's where it all started. And through that, so many lessons were learned that translate back over to life. And out of that came the opportunity to do a TED Talk as well. So obviously all this growth, produced, exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah. So something that you said that was really interesting is in your personal life, you went through some really hard times. How had you built the mental muscles or fortitude to make it through that and not become a bitter, angry person? Like, how did you push through that hard? Because we all have a hard or multiple hard times in life. And we all see those women who kind of shrivel up. They're angry, bitter, not very joy filled people. And then we see those amazing people where it's like, I want to be your friend. There's something beautiful inside of you. And I have to believe that there's some intentionality before the hard time comes. So,
Yeah, yeah.
how do you
No,
do that?
well, honestly, to not take credit, it really comes down to being extremely humbled. And when you face something hard and you become extremely humbled and you realize, for me, it's my faith. And it was like, wow, what a big reminder that nothing I've accomplished is on my own. Nothing
Yeah.
that I had to this point was on my own. So now that it's been taken away from me, who am I to be upset because I didn't deserve this to begin with, right? So it's
Yeah.
kind of in this state of grace, of understanding grace, that anything we have, we are to be grateful for, and anything that's taken away, we shouldn't be angry about, because we still have so much more than anybody around us. And so,
Yeah.
sometimes when you're thrown into that hard situation and it becomes sink or swim, for me, really the reason to swim was because I did have small kids at that time that I needed to provide for, that, I had to find a way for. And, at the time, I didn't realize how much I was growing, but it wasn't something that made me bitter. It was something that just humbled me. And I think it's hard to be angry or bitter when you're humbled.
Yeah.
And, that's what really ultimately leads to a lot of gratefulness as well, when you do get through that hard time.
Yeah, so talking about triathlon now, you were in Kona, so you went to the World Championships last fall, and you'd been training a lot leading up to that. You'd done 70.3 World Championships, right? And that was the race where you're like, oh, that was a tough one. So you didn't want to relive those particular or that particular race day. You got a coach, you're training. When you get on the race course and you face a 12-plus-hour day ahead of you, you have no idea. You can't control the weather. You can't control your stomach. You can't control the racers around you and what they do on their bikes. The waves in the ocean, like none of that is within your control. How did you work on your mindset in all of the training leading up to World Championships so that if you were to face something that was going to throw you for a loop on race day, you had the resiliency to push through it?
Yeah, and I think it started way back. It started way back when I decided to do that first marathon, with nothing but Google as my coach. Now looking back, and I think you probably say the same thing, I'm the most proud of those races that I got through, that I had, looking back, I would be very scared to go back and do those, because I know
Yes.
now everything I did it now. But there's something beautiful about just jumping in and figuring it out on your own, because you don't know what to be scared of until it's too late. And over time, you really start to build that resilience. And I think for me, what I always go back to, my first triathlon ever, it was just an Olympic. It's actually the race I'm the most proud of, because it was a nightmare. I mean, when I say I literally was taking off my wetsuit halfway through because it was choking me. And then
Yeah.
I literally was the last person coming in, got lost on the bike because they had already brought in the people pointing where to turn,
Oh,
got lost
no.
on the run. They were already taking up the tables, and it was a golf course. And they were literally about to take down the big inflatable when I came to finish. I mean, it was like I was in tears all day. So really, after that, no matter what I go into, I always go back to that person, that I'm so proud of, because I was like, oh my goodness, you wanted to quit so bad and you didn't, right? And then you really start to realize that it's just a stepping stone of building the blocks to accomplish these things. And then the truth is, on the other side of fear is confidence. And so that every time you push through, you're going to end up walking away more confident, and that confidence just continues to build as you take on more races, and going into things like the world championship, or even back to my first full distance. I had really learned the lesson that you don't fear, there's no reason to have fear, you just respect the preparation. And if I knew that I put in the time and I respected that preparation to show up to that race, then there was nothing to be anxious or fearful about. Just like I told you on race day in Kona, when we were standing in the swim start, I was like, oh my goodness, this seems like a relief compared to what we've been through in training.
Yes. Yes.
We're going to have cheering. We're going to have people giving us waters, like we can relax. It's race day, and that really showed, the kind of coach we had too, to prepare us. And just like me, I know you really respect the preparation. And I think when you roll that back over to business as well, it's about doing the little things every day, consistency, that are going to build the blocks to be able to step up, to be able to scale, to be able to make the next big jump. It's not about going from 0 to 100, but it's about what we do every day. And I know I'm going on here, but I'll say one more thing. When I look at high performers, because I also have a podcast where I interview the highest performers in the sport of triathlon, from Olympians to the world champions. And, the biggest thing you see is you don't go from 0 to a high performer overnight. It's making the decision every day to do one thing that's considered high performance. And in our everyday lives, it could be writing that thank you note, or taking the time to be grateful for something, or doing something extra for your spouse, even though they might not deserve it that day. All those little things that we choose each day that are maybe one step above what the normal person would do, that compounds. And then that's what turns you into a high performer. And so when you break it down that way, it's not overwhelming. And we all have the chance to be high performers if we break it down each day, because the consistency will compound.
That is so good. I've never thought of it that way, that we all have that choice to be a high performer. So if we convert this to the thought of business, I work with people and their money. And so one of the first things I have them do is to practice Money Mondays, which just means on Monday, before we start anything else, we look at our numbers. And maybe that's not looking at a set of financials because we don't know how to do that yet, or it's really overwhelming. But maybe we just look at our budget. Maybe we just look at the previous week's sales. We look at our numbers. We do that consistently. And I always tell them, if you do that as a business owner, you are leaps and bounds above the businesses next door to you who don't even know what to look at and have zero interest. So I think that I never thought of putting it that way, choosing one activity every day that will set you apart or set you ahead of those that will not do that work.
Right. Because as you see, I'm sure when you get in, and then not being in your field, I don't understand all of it, but I see that there's probably a lot of situations where they're trying to take care of all the big fires. Yes. And they're neglecting the little things every day that they could be doing. And then once that compounds, these fires become out of control because they never got a handle on the little things that they needed to be keeping track of and disciplining themselves in each day. And so that's probably what you're going in and cleaning up all the time.
Dialing back, simplifying down, what really do we need to focus on? Because if we have a bunch of business debt and our cash is out of control, we have to first understand where that's coming from. So what one number should we focus on? How do we dial in? And that's the same thing you do in your business with your clients, and then of course in your triathlon life. So tell us about, because people would look at you, you have a really fun Instagram, so we'll share all that at the end. Everyone needs to follow you. If we look at your Instagram, we think, oh my goodness, Joy has it all together, all the things. She looks so cute in her running outfits and, and you're traveling and all. So tell us a typical day in your life, because you train a lot for triathlon. You have a business, you're a mom of 5, you have several kids that are married, you travel. Tell us what a day looks like. And what are some of the key disciplines that are non-negotiable for you every day?
Right, right. So, I think what's so important, and it's funny, I've seen you referencing it too. I love the stage of life that we're both in because I think when we first start out, it's out of control, right? Like we're still trying to build our career. We're raising the younger kids. We're just in this, we're very tied down,
Yeah.
and doing all the things that are out of our control. And my biggest advice to somebody younger or to the older me is continue to put in the grind, like we're saying, the consistency and all of that. But your ultimate goal needs to be to design the life that you love, design the
Yeah.
life where you're making your schedule, where you're doing the things you're passionate about, where you're doing, because you don't want to stay. Everyone's got to put in that time, but you don't want that to be your whole life, right?
Yeah.
And so, over time, I've been able to kind of take more control to, like I'm saying, to build this medical business, which now that's starting to change completely too, as all these big private investors are coming in, and it's wrecking my world too. So I'm having to start to think about going other directions. But I've already built the base and the confidence
Yeah.
that I've done this once before, I can do it again. And so, a typical day for me, it depends. I do have certain meetings, and I do travel. I live outside of the Metro Atlanta area, so about an hour out. So with traffic, wherever I'm going to be an hour, maybe hour 15, some days hour and a half. But I'm able to set up those meetings pretty much, within a realm of where I want those meetings to be for the most part. So that way I am able to, you're probably like me. One of the first things I look at is my training calendar.
I
And then
know, unfortunately or fortunately, yes. Yes.
I kind of build, okay, this is a heavy day of training, so I'm going to try to minimize my meetings on this day. So yeah, the days I'm traveling, sometimes I can work out where I'm doing my meetings. And then the other days I can, work from home. So having that flexibility is really nice. And then, obviously with the kids, when you have older kids, we're in the stage of life. Like last night, I had after my I hurt my shin last night, got started on my bike later. And then I get a text. My daughter wasn't even home, but I get a text from one of her friends. Can I stop by? I'm having an emotional day. I just need to talk to somebody. So she was in here while I was on my trainer, just talking to me. So with the older kids too, you have the unexpected all the time, all their
Yes.
activities. You have their friends over. We're planning a graduation right now, another graduation. So, you have all these other activities, and it's hard to go to bed early because they're up late,
And they
they're
want to
getting home
talk.
late.
Yep.
Yeah, you can't get in bed before they're home. It's all that stuff. So as they get older, there's still a lot of challenges. But yeah, for the most part, I am grateful that I have built a career now around where I'm a little bit more in control of my schedule. And
Yeah.
that's what I advise everybody to start working towards.
So to fit all this in, your business, your marriage, your kids, your adult kids, your triathlon, high performance triathlon, what are non-negotiables for you that keep you disciplined? Because a lot of people, I'm sure people say this to you. People will say to me, "Oh, I wish I could. Oh, you're so lucky whatever,
Yeah,
fill in the blank." And I'm like, "Oh, actually it's pretty intentional. Like it's a lot of
yeah,
work to manage all these things well."
yeah.
So for you, what are non-negotiables to keep all of these things going?
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of the non-negotiables is I always want to make sure I have the time for my kids, right? So it's funny, they're grown, but I still feel like I want to be here a lot of times when they get home from school. Even
Yeah.
if they're not talking to me, even if I'm in my office working, I just feel like that presence of, mom being home is so special and such a privilege. And even though they're older and they don't need me home, I like to be here, right? And I also like to wake up and make breakfast. One of the things I love to do is make breakfast on Saturday mornings before my son goes to work. Make him a big pancake, something breakfast, and just get that little time. I'm not one of those people that I have to make this big dinner every night or anything
Yeah.
like that. My husband, helps with the cooking too, and sometimes it's grab and go. So it's more about those Saturday morning breakfasts and being home, even if I'm working or working out when the kids are home after school. And then, really the training just keeps me on track.
Yeah.
It me discipline to get in bed at a decent hour, to eat right, to be in touch with my body. It really, and it also teaches me a lesson every day. Like, some of these workouts, as that she gives us when they're so hard, there's just something magical about when you show up and you're like, there's no way I'm going to get this done today. Like, I feel terrible. It's been a long day. But there's just something about once you get out there and you push yourself, maybe for me, I down these rain caffeine drinks. I don't do them often, but there's certain workouts that I know I'm going to need one of those drinks.
Yep.
Usually I try out. There's just something magical about after you do it, the struggle of getting through it, that just creates this confidence that's insane and helps you keep going.
I know the first time I saw on Instagram, you've done track workouts for a long time, and we hadn't, and I would always watch and think, oh my goodness, that looks torturous. The first one I got, which is fairly recently, so we just started our track workouts probably 2 months ago. I looked at that and I was like, I was really scared to do the workout, like I thought this is scary because I don't know how it's going to feel, and I'm pretty sure it's not going to feel good. What if I can't do it? I did it, and literally I think it was 200 meters or whatever, I just was like, I'm gonna die. Like, I have 7 more. I'm gonna die. Like, I'm gonna just fall over, But then I did them all, and I was like, okay, I did it. That's pretty cool, And so I think there's something about pushing ourselves, which is what you talk about in your TED Talks, right? Like, pushing yourself to grow and not remaining comfortable. So talk to us about that. Like, why are you so insistent on helping people have a growth mindset? Like, why do we have to push ourselves? Why can't we just sit on the couch and watch TV?
I know. Well, it is the key. It's the fountain of youth. Honestly, that's what I think. I think it's the fountain of youth, and I'll explain a few things. But one thing I always go back to, I'll share this before I get into what you asked, was I interviewed, she is literally the top triathlete right now out there, Taylor Knibb. And one of the things when I interviewed her that stuck out to me, she said the biggest lessons and the biggest coaches she appreciated were the coaches that made her feel and realize she wasn't fragile. And so that always sticks out in my mind when I go to a trial. I'm like, I might pull my glute again. I might whatever. And then I remind myself, you're not fragile. Don't paint in your mind that you're fragile. You go out there until you can't do it, and you keep going because you're not fragile. And I think sometimes we paint in the mind that we're fragile. And if you think like that, you will be that. And the same thing when I talk about a growth mindset and going into the aging process. When I interview and when I meet some of these older athletes, I'm obsessed right now with track. Like, I'm trying to figure out a way to pursue it. It's hard. I don't know how I'm going to work it in with long distance, because I seem to be like getting myself hurt, because what our track workouts are like. So to try to push your max at the end of that, I don't know. We got to figure out the algorithm. But there's Sue McDonald is like, she's like the fast. She's 61. And if you were to see her at these master track meets where she's setting world records, it just blows my mind that at 61, she could be running D1 track right now. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah.
And if you look into there's this other guy that that's on the waterfall team that when you look into his eyes, I'm like, there's just something about these older athletes that they look so young inside, and they're so driven, and they're so alive, and it's because God created everything in this universe to grow, right? And if you're not growing, you're dead. And so the key to the fountain of youth, it's not necessarily on the outside, the result, it's the inside. If you're waking up every day and you're chasing something and you're just trying to be one step ahead of where you were yesterday, and your comparison is just against yourself. How can I be better? You're going to have this just sense of waking up every morning excited, right? And thrilled with life. And when they study longevity in older people in all different countries, I'm sure you've seen some of those documentaries. A big part of it is that positive mindset, the grateful mindset, and then growth mindset, because they're still out there farming their land, right? Or they're still out there feeling needed, feeling like they're trying to improve something. And that's what keeps our mind and body and spirit sharp. And, it's the key to life. And that's why I'm just so set on the growth mindset.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So there's a gal that I met in our life group at church about a year ago. And when she walked into the room, I was like, oh my goodness, I want to be her when I grow up. She's 74, Joy. She dresses the cutest little thing ever. So spunky, so put together. I mean, so she has a house in Dallas. Her and her husband, they also have a house here in Tennessee because she wants to be by both sets of grandkids. So she flies back and forth. She's 74 years old, hops on a plane. She's involved in 4 or 5 Bible studies. I mean, and that I never pinpointed that's what it is. Like she wants to learn, she wants to meet people. She's not sitting at home saying, "Oh, we're past retirement age. I'm just going to go to the tennis club and have my sweet tea and be done for the day." She's like, "Who can I meet? What can I learn? How can I get involved?" And it's
Right.
beautiful. It makes her so beautiful.
No, absolutely. And, going into the TED Talk, which was the question you first asked about, it all goes back to, like, I truly believe that when we go back to when we were a child and we had no limitations on our potential, right? Because, I mean, we thought we could do anything, we're
Yeah.
trying to be a superhero, we're trying to jump these ranks. I mean, like, we're just so free and exercise. It's funny when I see little kids riding, our neighborhood's pretty hilly, and when I see them riding our neighborhood, I'm thinking, they're not thinking how I need to run, what's my power, or how long am
No,
I riding,
I won't make it. Yeah.
or no, they're just riding for fun, right?
Yeah.
And so there's so much about being a child that we lose, and that's why we age. So we really need to go back to that belief. When we were a child, we all believed that we were made for more. And what's so cool is so many of these top professional athletes that I interview, they can all go back to a time or a drawing where they had themselves as a professional or on the podium or in the Olympics, or like they believe that. And the difference with them, as opposed to some other people who don't pursue their dreams, is they had the courage to chase it, right? They had the courage that as life started hitting them, as you got older, as you hit those teenage years, as all these limiting beliefs start putting on you, so many of us start giving into that, right? But it's the people that have the courage to stay in that mindset when they're a child and they believe they were made for more, that end up doing the bigger, greater challenges and overcoming it because they stay in that childlike mindset. And if you go watch my TED Talk, you'll hear about that one instance in my life that ended up carrying. And honestly, it's what sparked this chase of a growth mindset. And I've been chasing that little 4-year-old kid to be like her again all these years now. And
Yeah.
I always, what would she do? How would she act? And I'm still not there yet because she was fearless. It was at 4 miles, I ran a 9.3 mile race, and I remember getting to the end and shaking and crying and falling over and pushing my little body to that limit. And I'm like, I haven't been able to replicate that yet.
Yeah. Because now we have the fear that we didn't have as
Yeah.
children. So thinking about small business, when you start a small business, I would say we can all remember like sitting at the dining room table. We're so excited about our concept. We're plotting out what our store is going to look like or our product, who's going to buy it. It's all a dream, right? Then we launch, hard things happen, and we start to collect fear, right? We
Yeah.
collect it. So then it limits our future growth in our business because, well, now we know what it feels like to run out of money. Now we know what it feels like when the customers don't come. Instead of pushing through that like we did when we first launched, we start to collect those fears, and that's what limits growth. So that's really interesting. Would you agree, or how
Yeah.
would you
There's
put
such
that
a parallel.
together?
Yeah, there's such a parallel to that. And and once again, we're both trying to sell everybody on endurance sport, but part of our training is getting us into, there's a book actually called The Messy Middle as well. The middle of anything is the hardest, right? It's the middle of the long distance race where the beginning you're all excited, but by the middle it's like, I'm so tired and I still have so much longer to go.
Yes.
And that's where if you can learn to gather your thoughts and gather your mindset And for most businesses, that is in that middle where the money is being lost. It's not looking good.
The
It's where
employees
we
are
want to pull the,
leaving. Yep.
yeah, everything, like it's that middle part that is the absolute hardest. But we have to recognize that, and we have to remember, go back to another time where you overcame that middle part. We all have, and it might not be business, it might be a personal situation, it might be when you're in elementary, you know, I mean, it could be something, and you got to go back. And I always tell people, you don't need me to inspire you or these big influencers to inspire you. You have so many stories within your own life that you can go back to that will inspire yourself. And they're more
Yeah.
powerful because that was you, right? That
Yeah.
was you. So inspire yourself. Think about all those times, document them, write them down so you can inspire yourself. And, you know, and that's what we see too in our races when we do better, is because, like, for instance, my best race last year, Kona was amazing and I loved it and I had so much fun. But my best race was right after that because it was so close afterwards. It was Ironman Florida. And it's because that feeling of just settling into the messy middle was so fresh
And familiar.
and so like familiar. And I mean, I was like, wow, the bike's almost over. And then in the run, I was like, yeah, I know what this feels like. This is good. I'm just going to settle. I'm not going to be so anxious that the end is so far away. And that ability to settle is so powerful. And it's what helped me have, like, you know, my best race ever. Because it's important that we recognize those times as incredible opportunities to grow and to learn. And if it fails, guess what? It fails, but you're going to be able to go on and take that as a growth opportunity to something else. And you can't be afraid of failure.
Yeah, I just did a half marathon last Sunday and I was getting sick. I knew it the night before. You know, you get the scratchy throat and I'm like, please, no, just please. So I'm drinking all the stuff, emergency like crazy. I'm like, this is going to, because I really wanted to PR. And I've done this race every year for many, many years. And so I'm like, I've trained the most this year. I want to PR. So I had all of these expectations and I was like, this cold is such a bad time. So, but I thought, okay, so I know what a half marathon feels like. I know when I'm going to start to feel bad. I know, you know, we know all the things, the rhythm. And it was not a PR race. It was a PR at that race, but not a PR for me, which was disappointing. But I ran it anyway, even though I was feeling pretty crappy. But it was drawing on those files that helped me push through. I have never wanted to walk so bad, Joy, because I felt
Oh,
awful, like I had chills. I mean,
okay.
I was getting a really bad
Yeah.
cold. And I just was like, you know how your brain is like, you can walk, it's okay. Why would you?
Yeah.
You're not going to PR anyway. Like, so your brain's telling
Yeah.
you all these things. You can just take a couple steps. Nope, going to run, even if I have to shuffle, running motion. So I ran through the whole thing, but it's because of the files of doing half marathons so many times. I knew, okay, when you hit mile 8, of course, you're going to feel like this. Then we're going to get to 10. And then here's how you're going to feel. Um, and that's so important in anything in life. That's why I think endurance sports of any type are so good for us. You know, plan your first 5K, train for it, push through it because it helps your mental muscles to know
Mhm.
that you can do really hard things. So
Mhm.
how
Mhm.
would you help us kind of in closing? How would you like to correlate training for a sport, whether it's endurance, you know, running, swimming, whatever that looks like, and small business resiliency? And how can we think about how they move back and forth so fluidly?
Sure. So I'll tell you the biggest lessons and the reasons I was so hooked after I did my first marathon are the lessons that apply here. So the first lesson I learned, which is what you were saying, is when it starts to get really hard or you're really discouraged. I mean, this can be emotional within a business. You're starting to actually feel depressed. You're starting to feel completely overwhelmed. The worst thing you can do is stop, right? And that's what I learned in the marathon. And this ended up being this downhill marathon, which I thought was going to be easier,
That
but
sounds fun. Yeah.
but I didn't know that if you don't know how to take a downhill marathon, you take it wide open and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm moving. But you're using your muscles in a way that you never trained them to be used. And
Yeah.
by mile 10, I mean, my everything was seizing up. I mean, and I was so shocked. I was like, but I've run 21. Like, what's going on? It was because I didn't know how to take it.
Yeah.
And so they could actually be, because you're using both your front and your back muscles in a downhill marathon. So you have to train for it. But anyway, but that was the first lesson that I was wanting to quit. I was like, well, I'm just not a marathon runner, whatever. But as I was deciding, having that little conversation, I kept moving. Even though it was a slow crawl, I was moving. And that's so important when it comes to business. When it comes to life, do not stop. Even if you're just going through the motions, right? Still get up and go. Even if you feel like a walking dead person, it doesn't matter. Still get up and go. Like, don't stop while you're deciding your next move or what to do. Because that's, once you stop, the chances of you continuing on, it gets so much less, and chances are you're going to quit. When you stop the movement, you cannot stop the movement at all. And then the next lesson I learned after I kind of moved through that was remove yourself from the current situation and start to visualize, okay, once I get through this, what's it going to be like on the other side, right?
Yeah.
And you can even apply this to people who are in the hospital. If you're in the hospital for whatever reason, you don't want to just picture your life in the hospital.
Yeah.
You want to picture, when I get out of here, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to the beach with the kids. I'm going to, and you have to give yourself that little break of relief because it produces hope. And we all need hope to keep pushing forward. So you remove yourself, allow yourself a little bit of chance. If I can get through this financial struggle right now within my business, if I can change this little bit of situation, what is it going to feel like when I'm done? What's it going to look like? What are my numbers going to look like? What am I going to, and you give yourself that little chance, of hope to keep going. And then, ultimately, I don't know how quite to apply this to business, but when all else fails, when I got to the very, very end of this marathon, I just went a little dark, meaning like, in my mind, I just played this game of, if you don't finish, like, what if something happened to your kids? I mean, it was kind of this crazy, but I could kind of see maybe some of these Navy SEALs have to go to get through stuff. But, there is some of that you can apply. Do I really want to be completely bankrupt? Do I really want all my friends and family to be laughing at me? Do I really want to be a disappointment? No, I don't want that. I don't want to be a failure so bad that I'm going to find a way to make this work. I'm going to humble myself. Maybe I do need to ask for an investor. Maybe I do need to break some of the rules that I made for myself, but I'm going to do it because no matter what, I'm making this happen. And, so those three things were kind of principles that I took away from my first marathon and why I was so hooked. And then those are things I've applied to so many situations, including being in the hospital at one point on a ventilator and waking up there, like feeling waterboarded and going back and tapping into all these lessons. And that was my big reminder to me that, what, this training is bigger than life, because I don't know that I could have even gotten through that health situation had I not had these tips and tricks, in my pocket.
Yeah. Well, I think that tip number 3, that's why we have a little bit of a scary coach. Because while I'm running, I'm thinking, so I'm telling myself, you can just walk. And I'm like, she'll see it on the file and she'll know that I walked. So even if I really want to walk, I can't because I'll get in trouble. But, with business, that's why it's important to have a coach, to have good people on your team, because sometimes we don't have the personal strength or the mental strength in and of ourselves. And so to have someone where you say, my client's dealing with money, like, I know I want to spend this, but I'm going to be talking to Ciara on Monday and she's going to ask me if I followed the budget. So I won't. Sometimes we need that outside accountability to help us. And that's why if you're in a sport, of course, it's so good to have more than Google as your coach. It's good to have good friends. It's good to have good relationships, good people on our business team, because sometimes we need that. That's what can push us when we are not able and capable in and of our own to keep going. So I love
and
that.
I'll jump in. What it does is it ups your baseline of normal, right? So, and that's so important in every area of life. For us in sport, jumping into the coach that we had, being surrounded by the athletes we have, even as I interview these top athletes, my struggle is actually to give myself credit for anything I do, because my baseline of what's normal is so high.
Yeah.
That I'm like, oh my goodness, I'll never even reach the baseline. But in a good way, it minimizes, scared or pain or pushing, because I'm like, dude, that's the least I can do. And I'm still like pedestrian,
The first time I trained for an Ironman, I listened to David Goggins' book
Oh
while
my
I would
goodness.
run. Because I was like, how can I stop running right now when I'm listening to his book as he's telling his story? And sometimes those are the things we need, right? We have to surround ourselves with something that's so elevated. I love that you said that. That's great. And we can do that in our marriage relationships, in our, as a mom, business, so many areas in our life. Find people who are smarter, wiser, been there, done that. Surround yourself with those people, aspire to that. And then your normal becomes much higher than the normal you would create for yourself.
Right. So even when you fall short, you're still so far ahead of
Yes.
the normal person out there. And that's an incredible place to be.
Well, I love following you on Instagram. Every day I'm like, Bella and I, we're like, what's Joy doing? The other day you had a 3-hour ride on a Thursday. I'm like, why does she have oh, that's right. She's training for fulls. I'm like, I'm not
Yeah.
training enough. Joy's training more. And Bella's always like, Mom, she does her long rides in the week. And so we love following you and the inspiration you bring to us. You're always such a joy-filled person. I love your podcast, just listening to you talk to all of these amazing athletes. So, so great. So where can people find you? Where can they listen to your TED conversation, LinkedIn, all the things?
Sure. So go to LinkedIn. And if you find me on LinkedIn, please put in the message, just reference Ciara or something. So I see it, because my messages on LinkedIn get so lost. But you can find me there, Joy McAdams. On Instagram, it's J McAdams5. And then the TED Talk, you can just Google Joy McAdams TED Talk, and you can hear my whole little backstory of how I got into this crazy sport and everything I've learned from it.
I love it. And we'll put that all in the show notes. So if you're driving while you're listening today and you want to click on those show notes later, you'll be able to follow Joy, reach out, give her a shout out, follow along with her. And yeah, let her know that you heard her on the podcast here. Thank you so much for spending time with us and my listeners today.
Oh my goodness, it was a privilege. And everybody listen to Ciara. She's a good one. She's a good coach to stay on you.
I try. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's podcast. If this was helpful, if you feel like you are on the journey or someone else is on the journey to building more resiliency, would you share this episode? Shoot me an email. Let me know what you thought. And give us a review. It really does help. I know we all hear this on every podcast. Please review, but it does help to spread the word so that more people can find a podcast that could be beneficial for them. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Hey friend, thank you so much for tuning in today to the Inventory Genius podcast. If there's something that you heard today on the podcast episode and you want to dig deeper into becoming an inventory genius yourself, I want to invite you to head on over to my website, ciarastockeland.com, where I have multiple ways that you and I can work together on your inventory. I want to help you with your profit, your cash flow, and your paycheck, because at the end of the day, it's all related to your inventory. So head on over to the website, connect with me. I'll work with you soon. See you then. Hey there, friend. You know how important it is to me that you have accurate and up-to-date books when it comes to your business. Now, we're not all wired to or even have the desire to be bookkeepers or accountants in our own business, and that's okay. That's why we have amazing professionals just like Megan from Finding Freedom Financial Services. Megan is the founder of Finding Freedom Financial, and her goal is to help business owners find confidence and clarity when it comes to their small business finances. She provides bookkeeping and tax services for women who get anxious and confused about what they should be doing when it comes to their books. I would highly encourage that you reach out to Megan at Finding Freedom Financial and see if her bookkeeping services could be the right fit that you've been looking for. FindingFreedomFinancial.com. Check it out, connect with Megan. Let's see what we can do about getting you accurate books for 2024.